Welcome. Welcome to Takeaways with Tay. I am your host, Tay, also aka Taylor Nixon, aka the greatest, aka the most absolute everything. Yes, so welcome to Takeaways with Tay, where I provide you with key takeaways from books that I've read so that you don't have to read them. This this show here was created for all of my busy people out there who love knowledge, love insights, love bettering themselves, but just don't have the time to read a book. Maybe you have the time to listen to a podcast, or you have the time to read summaries or things like that. But essentially, this show was created so that I could provide some value to people who are unable to read books but would like to still benefit from the knowledge that books give. So yeah, um, before we dive into this week's book, I wanted to kind of touch on the topics that have been very, I guess you could say, popular this week. Particularly in pop culture, we had Kendrick Lamar, the whole conversation about Kendrick Lamar, Lil Wayne, Jay-Z. There was like a lot of talk, a lot of commotion on this whole Super Bowl ordeal. So, for those of you who may not be aware, Kendrick was selected to headline a Super Bowl this year, well, 2025, in New Orleans. And there was a lot of backlash because people were saying that, oh, Lil Wayne should have did it, Lil Wayne deserved it, and Jay-Z is being whatever because of who knows, right? So I wanted to chime in on the conversation because I have an opinion and everyone else has an opinion, so I just wanted to share mine. Personally, I think that this conversation is very, what's the word? It's, to me, it doesn't make sense because it's a clear, there's a clear reason for why Kendrick is headlining and not Lil Wayne. And I think it just goes back to business. Like, Lil Wayne, if you really think about the type of year that Lil Wayne had, what has he done? Where have you seen Lil Wayne? Where is he, like, what music has he dropped? He did a feature on a song with Cordae, on a song with Flage, and he did some other, I think, interviews and things like that. But outside of that, what type of year did he really have? Or what has been his output? He's performing at different festivals and things, but he's forgetting his lyrics. He has, there's no doubt that Lil Wayne is a legend at what he does and that he makes great music. But when you talk about putting him on the stage of a Super Bowl, where it's arguably not even arguably, it's the biggest stage in entertainment, and everyone from across the world is going to see this. So there's a certain image that the Super Bowl, the NFL, would like to upkeep. And personally, I don't think Lil Wayne fits that. He's got tattoos on his face. He's an advocate for lean in all his music and even his music is not it's not the greatest of context. I don't think it's appropriate for families, children, things like that. So I don't think that he's the right pick for the Super Bowl. Could he perform at the Super Bowl? Like, could he be featured? Maybe not headlining it. Yes. But personally, I don't even think this shouldn't even be a discussion, in my opinion, because Kendrick is just obviously better, like, overall. But not even that, but Kendrick had the better year. Like, if you look, it's like people are comparing. It's like it's almost as if Kendrick didn't have the year that he had. Like, people are like surprised that he's being chosen, and I'm like, y'all act like he didn't just drop one of the greatest diss tracks of all time, and on top of that, run the whole summer up. Like, I mean, come on, like, we have to put things into context. I think people just are creating narratives that are not true about Jay-Z. And like, they know him, they know the beef between him and Lil Wayne, if there is even beef. Like, it's all speculation. But I think if we just look at the facts, if we look at the type of year that Kendrick had versus the type of year that Lil Wayne has had, it's obvious why Kendrick was chosen. There's also other things too. I feel like as like in Lil Wayne's position, he definitely said he was disappointed in himself, and that he set his expectations. He kind of felt like he was just going to get the opportunity because it was in New Orleans, because Jay-Z has a role in saying who performs. And I think that's a lesson for everyone who's watching, because it's like, one, don't expect for anyone else to do anything for you. And two, you just, if you want something in life, you have to put yourself in that position to get that. And if somebody gives you something, it's a gift. So I think that Lil Wayne put too high of an expectation on Jay-Z to put him in that position. Like, it's almost like entitlement. And people, it just raised a lot of commotion, because people were like very upset about him not getting chosen. I'm like, it's obvious, like, why he wasn't chosen. I don't understand why that's not obvious to other people, but that's just my take, and I wanted to share it. So, but this week, for those of you who are not aware, I am an educator. So I teach students in Beijing math, and I wouldn't say math is my strongest point. Like, previously, I've always been very strong with English, but teaching these students in Beijing math has really challenged me, and it's challenged me to see the world differently. It's challenged me to think mathematically, and it's challenged me. I've seen the way that they think and how they put things together, and I've really benefited from it. So I say all that to say, I read a book that essentially talked about the power of mathematical thinking, and how we can use math essentially to solve problems in our life, or to apply mathematical concepts to our lives. And I was talking to someone earlier this week where I was like, if you break math down to like the basic foundations, concepts, you got a number plus a number equals another number. So you can say A plus B equals C, right? If you know what A is and you know what B is, then we can figure out what C is. If you do A minus B, you get not C, but you'll probably get D, because it's going to be less than, A is going to be basically worse off than if you were to add A plus B. I'm saying all that to say that when you look at your life as like a math equation, right? So if you see like the world and life as mathematics, things can become more simple, right? If you know if you know the value that you have, and you know the value of someone else, and then you all put your values together, now you know what type of outcome, or you're more likely to know the type of outcome that you can expect to get, because you know the values that are coming together. So I also find it interesting, the more that I'm teaching math and learning math and diving into math, I find it interesting how much math is prominent in nature and just in our lives in general, when it comes to architecture, when it comes to our human bodies, when it comes to the orientations of the planets and the skies and the stars. There are countless or endless examples of math in nature, some of them being symmetry. So butterflies, the way that the wings of butterflies are, there's lines of symmetry. You have leaves have line of symmetry. You can fold them in half and they're the exact same once you do that. There's different geometry concepts, so like circles and spheres. Circles and spheres are nature's way of minimizing energy. So it's forming structures that are the most efficient in enclosing space. So that's why circles, like if you were to drop water on a surface, it tends to look like a circle. It's because of the surface tension and all that. But even bees, like the way that bees create their honeycombs, they use the shape of a hexagon because it maximizes space. And proportions, like our human bodies, the proportions of how long our arms are in comparison to our forearm, or there's all these different types of things that we can relate the world to when it comes to math. And I find that very interesting. I'm a nerd, so and I like to share that information. So the book that I was reading is called How Not to Be Wrong by Jordan Ellenberg. And about the author, so Jordan is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His birthday is actually the day after mine, so which is interesting because last week we were talking about Gabrielle Union, and her birthday is the same day as mine. His birthday is the day after mine, so October 30th. And he is a mathematician and an educator. And so he wrote this book, and essentially he is, throughout the entire book, he is talking about how math can be used as a tool to basically aid us in our ability to think critically and solve the problems that we have in our lives. So takeaway number one here is that math isn't just about numbers and formulas. I always struggle with math because that's what I thought. It was just like numbers, formulas, you put the numbers in a formula, you get an outcome, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize, or I wasn't taught that math, and oftentimes a lot of us are not taught that math actually relates to the real world in all these different types of ways. Like everything that we see essentially is, I don't want to say is math, but it can be, it was either created using a formula, using an algorithm. There might be a particular type of ratio that is involved in it. There's so many things there's so many ways that we can relate our lives in the world that we live in to math. So it's, when we think about math and when we think about, why do we learn it? Because I've always been that student too that's asking, like, why do we have to learn this? It's not necessarily that you might use, let's say, the quadratic formula in life. It's more so it's a muscle that you're exercising. So the more that you think mathematically and the more that you problem solve, and you might not have all of the values and you might have to solve for X, etc., but you're exercising that muscle to then be able to think critically or to problem solve in other areas of life. So it keeps your brain sharp, essentially. And it helps you make sense of the world. So it also helps you think beyond what's obvious, because oftentimes, let's say you're dealing with a more complicated problem, you might be given the value of A, but not the value of B, but you're given the value of C. So you have to figure out the value of B. So it makes you think differently about how to find that value of B, if that makes sense. And ultimately, you're able to piece everything together. So essentially, it helps you make the best decision. Math is interesting because you can get to the answer multiple ways. And I think that's synonymous with life, is that we all have different journeys and we all might have similar goals. We all might want to make $1 million. We all might want to have financial security. We might all want to be healthy, things like that. Like, our goals might be the same, but the way that we get to those goals look differently. And so that's what that's how I kind of related it to math, is like, yes, we might all get to the same answer, or we might all have the same answer, but the way that we got to that answer might be different. You might have added, then subtracted, then divided. I might have subtracted, then divided, then added. As long as we got to the answer, then that's all that matters. Sometimes it takes us longer to get to the answers because we don't have all of the information that we need, or we might not know the best, most efficient way to get to an answer. And so that's also synonymous with life too, is like, sometimes it might take us longer than another person to get to our goal, our end goal. But that might be because the other person has more resources, or they maybe have more guidance, or maybe we kept doing this, we kept making the same mistake. And so in order for us to get to our goal, we had to get past that mistake. So, essentially, I think math acts as a blueprint for activating your will. Like, when you are able to know, okay, I'm trying to get to C, right? I know I have A, and I know what C looks like. So if I know what A looks like and I know what C looks like, I can figure out what does B need to be in order for me to get to C. And so essentially, that's why I say it acts as like a blueprint, because if you know what you want your outcome to be, then you know what your inputs need to be, or at least you have an idea, you have a starting point of where your input should be, so that you can get to your outcome efficiently. Second takeaway is that life is full of noise, and in math, noise is any unwanted change that interrupts your data set. And in life, noise is any unwanted change that interrupts your goals. So I'll say that again. In math, noise is basically any information that you get that is going to take away from you being able to solve the problem correctly or to get to the answer correctly. So for example, a lot of state tests, when they're asking students word problem questions, instead of saying Johnny had 5 apples, he took away 2, how many apples does Johnny have left? Instead of keeping the information simple, they might say Johnny, the little sister of Sarah, had 5 apples. Johnny took all 5 apples, gave 3 to Sarah, and then gave 2 more to Luke. How many apples does he? They'll add in other extra words, extra details that you don't necessarily need to solve the problem. So that's considered noise. And in math, like mathematicians, the way they do it is they look at the problem and they try to eliminate as much noise as possible in order to get the correct answer. So like if you're applying math to life, you have to figure out what it is that you're trying to, what's your end goal, what's your outcome that you want. And then once you know that, whatever noise might come your way. So noise could look like unexpected events, losing a friend, losing a job. It could be scrolling on social media. It could be being too busy to focus. Whatever that noise looks like, you have to know that it's noise. You have to be able to identify it as noise because it's stopping you from getting to your end goal. And you have to be able to essentially compartmentalize it, put it in another side or dedicate time for it another time or whatever the case may be. But you don't want to allow the noise to become so loud that you then can't finish trying to get to your end goal, that you can't get to your end goal. So when we can minimize noise in our lives, it can mean like taking a step back to analyze what's most important sometimes. Like sometimes when there's a lot of things going on, you can become overwhelmed and not know what to do next because there's so much going on. So sometimes being able to take a step back and just analyze all the different parts that are going on in your life, all the different facets, all the different people you need to talk to or things you need to accomplish or whatever the case may be, identifying what those things are, analyzing them and using this mathematical brain and then figuring out, okay, what's the most crucial thing for me to do right now? What is the most time pressing event that I need to take care of right now? What is the most like if I don't do it, then it's going to affect me the most. And then you can kind of order, what to do next based upon that. But that all is like, it's a mathematical thinking, that strategy that you're applying to life. And then third takeaway here is that risk is better than uncertainty. So with math, of course, we don't always have all the values. So let's use the example A plus B equals C. Sometimes we might know what B is, but we don't know what A is. Or we might know what C and A are, but we don't know what B is. So essentially, risk is basically like you're able to measure it. So if you're able to measure it, then you're able to mitigate it. If you can't measure it, if you can't measure risk, or if you don't have a way to measure risk, then you're you're more susceptible to it because you don't know how much to anticipate. You don't know how much to prepare for. You don't know how to pad yourself against that risk. But there's also uncertainty, and uncertainty is less predictable and more challenging to quantify. So a lot of times when we're navigating through life, we're afraid to take risks, but also the other side of that is uncertainty. Like if we're afraid to take risks, which are calculated, then there's a level of uncertainty to a certain extent that we are also not necessarily accounting for. So let's give an example here. If you are planning a trip, right? If you're trying to plan a trip, but you're broke and you don't know when the next time you'll get money so that you can actually afford that trip, it's going to be very hard to plan that trip. if that makes sense, because you don't know, you're in a level of uncertainty where you don't know how much money you can even put towards the trip. You don't know what you don't know all the things that the trip are going to require, like food, transportation, lodging, all those things. You don't even know, you can't even begin to decipher what those things might look like for you, because you don't even know how much money you can even put towards that. And a lot of figuring out the lodging and the where you're going to go, it depends upon your budget. How much money can you spend? So it's like when you're planning a trip while broke, the uncertainty is there's too much. So you can't do it, and you're more likely to fail. Whereas opposed, if you know how much money you can put towards a trip, then you can mitigate the risk of the expenses of that trip by saying, okay, here's my budget, and then sticking within that budget, and maybe accounting for some mishaps along the way and putting aside some money for that as well. And then now, instead of being out who knows how much money, now you know how much money you're likely to be out, as opposed to not knowing. Now certain things like uncertainty is not all bad, like some things we just can't be too certain about. And even if we have all the mathematical thinking in the world, there's just certain things that we just can't be too certain about. But I'm essentially, what I'm getting away from this book is that not to leave your life to uncertainty. So especially if you have a vision for your life, like if you have a vision for your life, just expecting for life to just lead you and, not really having a certain plan for how to get what you want is essentially you're allowing your vision, you're making it open and susceptible to failing or not being able to see that vision through. If you have a vision, you want to be able to calculate, okay, what do I need to do to execute this vision? Who do I need on my team? What resources do I need? And then when you know that, you're more likely to get those things because you have an awareness that that's what you need. Also, math, to make progress in it, you have to keep questioning your beliefs. So this just goes back to knowing that there's multiple ways to get to one answer. Just because you might get to the answer one way doesn't mean that that's the only way. So you have to, in order for you to kind of grow and expand your thinking, you have to think about other ways to get to an answer. So oftentimes, like when I'm teaching my children how to do math, I'll teach them one method and then we'll double check the answer with a totally different method, just so that they are accustomed to both methods and they know that both methods exist. And that way, method number one might work better in this case versus method number two working better in this case. And then they can make the decision based upon whatever the case may be. But they at least have those tools and those different methods for getting to the answer. But in order for them to even have those methods and tools, they had to think outside the box and consider that there are other ways for getting to the answer. If they didn't even have that consideration or that awareness that that's possible, then them even considering another method is kind of arbitrary and unusual, because it's like, oh, I didn't even know that this was possible. Like, I didn't even know this could exist. Also, part of challenging your beliefs is asking why and what if. So, you might ask a question like, well, why is this? Or what if this was different? How would that change my answer? How would that change the way that I approach the problem? And it's the same thing in life. If you have a situation, you have a problem, and you think about it one way, it's like, okay, what if instead of thinking about it this way, I thought about it this way? And then that completely changes your problem solving and how you go about solving that problem, because you took the time out to think differently about what if it was different and why things had to be a certain type of way. And it might, sometimes it might feel stupid or pointless, I should say, but it's a good practice to get into, or at least just try it, because you never know what insights you might get, just from asking those questions. And math is a mindset. So it's not just numbers and equations. The more that I'm getting into it and teaching these students things, it is a mindset. It's like, it makes a lot of sense. Numbers are very consistent, and numbers are very formulas, all that. They're very consistent. So, like I said, if you can apply mathematical thinking to your life, then especially if you feel like your life is all over the place, then you can kind of develop some type of consistency or some type of, I guess you could say, like anchor or clarity when it comes to what you want out of life and how you can go about getting it. And I think that it helps me a lot because I tend to be scattered brained sometimes when I'm thinking about different things. And so it gives me that ability when I'm thinking mathematically. I'm like, okay, I need to get this done. So I need to do this. I need to do this in order to get this done. And I gotta cancel out the noise, whatever the noise might be in my life. I have to cancel that out for the time being, and so that I can make sure that I get whatever it is that I said I want to get done. So yeah, there's more solutions to a problem than you realize. You just have to tap into it, and you have to challenge yourself to think differently. This has been a segment by yours truly, Tay. It's kind of actually went by a little bit faster than I thought it would, and which is kind of interesting because I literally spent the first 5 minutes talking about Kendrick Lamar. But other than that, you all have a great rest of your week. Well, great start to your week. Oh, wait. Okay. So one more thing. This week is going to be super important for me. If you haven't streamed by already, because it's out on all streaming platforms, and I'll be making a special announcement about it coming this Thursday, so about in 4 days. And if you don't follow me already, follow me on Instagram at I am Taylor Nixon. If you're on YouTube, I am going to be starting a new YouTube channel with Takeaways with Tay. So I'm going to separate it from Taylor for my music channel, and I'm going to create it specifically for the books. So starting from the ground, it's humbling. But I think that's what's best. So if you follow me or if you're subscribed to me on YouTube, just know that there is a new channel, and I will have the information for that in the description so that you can go ahead and subscribe to that, share it with your friends and your family. And yeah, if you're already subscribed to me, thank you so much for supporting and for tuning in. And now we will end the live. Peace. Y'all take care.